The first time I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey at about the age of 15, I was largely naive to its thematic prospects. The film was slow, extremely minimalistic at times, and to a teenager attuned to the likes of Star Wars, it was quite boring. But nevertheless, something about it reverberated in my mind for years, and my understanding of the film would become somewhat of a recurring study spanning several repeated viewings, each at a different age in my life. And that's still ongoing. Unlike other sci-fi, the enigmatic nature of 2001 offers more questions than answers. However pretentious it is to say, there's no sidestepping this film's encryption of meaning that is far submerged beneath the subject matter on screen. Before I jump into my interpretation of the film, I should acknowledge that the book was written by Arthur C. Clarke, and he worked in cooperation with Stanley Kubrick. Eventually, he wrote an entire series of books that expand on the lore in all kinds of ways. However, I find that there's a great deal of thematic dissonance and even disagreement between the books and the film, so for this video, I'll be focusing exclusively on the subject matter of the film. None of this is to say that the books aren't wonderful. I just find that their merits differ dramatically from the film, and accordingly, I'd prefer to give them their own analysis. I'm not necessarily saying that I plan to do that, but that seems more appropriate than lumping them up with the film. This is not so much a movie about Dave, the spaceman poised for some adventure at the adversarial mercy of Hal, the malevolent AI. Of course, that's what 15-year-old me had hoped for. It's not that the film isn't entertaining at all, but entertainment value is more or less beside the point. This is a film about the nature of mankind, that nature's inherent ties to technology, and the trajectories that stem therefrom. It's easy to write off the first chapter as drug-infused irrelevance. You could be forgiven for that, but it is a mistake. One of the earliest things we see in the film is a tribe or a pack of primitive, almost men who rummage about like chimps until a monolith inexplicably enters the scene and they seem to worship it. Maybe the monolith is of some theological origin, or as the plot suggests, perhaps it's alien technology, but that's a question that throws the viewer off the scent as far as I'm concerned. The monolith, regardless of its lore, symbolizes intellectual epiphany. For all intents and purposes, it gifts its beholder with some opening of Pandora's box. In this case, it's the inception of technology, the bone cudgel being the first iteration, which of course is then used to dominate the ecosystem, conquering the nearby competition with ease. It's here that Kubrick marks the discovery of technology as the margin where an ape transcends to man. This next shot captures that essence immaculately. The ape man tosses the bone into the air, and as it drifts among the chaotic ether of the sky, the film cuts to a spacecraft doing precisely the same thing in more or less the same shape. This moment is perhaps the clearest indicator that 2001: A Space Odyssey is Kubrick's story of technology, starting with its origins and then leaping well into his prognosis for humanity. What follows is a more or less conventional exposition where we learn of this relatively modest space age, complete with theoretically sound artificial gravity and so on. The film cares deeply about immersing you in this theoretical way of life, and to that end, it takes its time. It would be woefully dishonest not to acknowledge that this film has a remarkably slow tempo that many won't appreciate, especially in an era with comparably hyperactive pacing. It's as if 2001 wants you to just live in its world for a little while, like a passenger. We observe that mankind functions casually alongside AI, but as the plot progresses, we watch as technology becomes autonomous. The threat begins to loom that our technology might begin to outwit and supersede us, perhaps even sabotage us should we be in a vulnerable enough position, such as the vacuum of space. The bulk of the plot revolves around exactly this. The aforementioned HAL AI attempts to outwit the human crew and see them to their peril. And after dismantling HAL, Dave learns about a recent discovery that had previously been kept secret from the crew. It's another ominous monolith like the one from before, this time on the moon. And soon after that, Dave encounters another in the cosmic vicinity of Jupiter. So, provided we can hold these monoliths to any standard of consistency, like the beginning of the film, what should follow is yet another epiphany of epic proportions. Does that happen? Honestly, it's hard to say. What actually follows is a sequence that may or may not make any sense at all. As colors spray all across the screen, you might hypothesize that this is light speed or some interdimensional travel, and then our protagonist appears in some cerebral chamber of white. He sees himself at every age, and we're left with nothing but questions. Where is he? Is this something to the effect of an alien encounter? Has he left the space-time continuum altogether? Is this the film's abstract attempt at portraying a newfound perspective that transcends the bounds of human capability? After all, what set apart ape from man was the epiphany of rock and bone as gifted by the monolith, while those untouched by this epiphany remained animals, utterly baffled and bewildered by technology, even in its most primitive form. They were incapable of grasping the concept, having not encountered the monolith. Perhaps likewise, Dave's encounter with the monolith prompted his ascension to a level of intellect that we as mere human viewers are incapable of grasping. Perhaps it's nonsense to us the same way that our technology is nonsense to an ape. And what does that make Dave? Is he the first evolutionary successor to the human species? Has he ascended to the status of a god or whatever succeeds us? The film posits that these are the frontiers to which technology and discovery might take us, or perhaps, to state it more properly, this is how technology and our descendants will leave us behind. And this is a concept that Kubrick continued to wrestle with for the next 25 to 30 years as the script for AI gestated among his notes. Ultimately, that project would be handed off to Steven Spielberg, and it's likely Kubrick's vision may have been lost in translation. Unfortunately, Kubrick did not live to see the final product that became of that. I hope to discuss that film in a future video, but for now, if you enjoyed this content, consider checking out my other videos. Your like and or sub would go a long way. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.